So, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Today is our first financial literacy workshop panel, we can call it that, at First Nations University. The first one ever that we've ever hosted, and thank you so much to USAND and for sponsoring this, and for Connexus and other groups for being here. And I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves in just a moment so that we can get your full names, your full titles, and the organizations you're representing. And so I guess I'll begin with that. Erin, might you begin? Thank
Sure.
you.
So my name is Erin. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of USAND.
I'm Andrea Pippin. I'm Manager of Financial Services with Connexus Credit Union, and I'm also a sessional lecturer here at the University of Regina. I teach resources classes.
My name is Michaela McKenzie. I work at Connexus Credit Union, and I am a financial services supervisor.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the introductions. My name is, I should have introduced myself initially. My name is Bettina Schneider. I'm assistant professor here at First Nations University in the Business and Public Administration program, and I'm teaching our first ever financial empowerment course at First Nations University. It's a pilot course that we're teaching this semester, and it's been going great. But this has been something we had hoped to launch a panel during Financial Literacy Month, November, to share with students some of the wisdom and knowledge that you have, given your specific roles at the organizations you represent. And so today, what I'll be doing is asking some questions, particularly focused on careers in the financial industry. And any responses that you have are greatly appreciated. So if you guys don't mind, I'll start with question one. Okay. What got you interested in a career in finance?
Me first?
That would be great.
I don't want to go first.
Not every time. Not every
time. So mine is a bit of an unorthodox story, I suppose. I grew up kind of not super wealthy, let's put it that way. And so my relationship to money and finance was always more from the negative perspective. And I always looked at money as a tool to be able to do things, but more as like a means to an end. And when I graduated university and I went off to work for government, I saw that the way that they had set up a lot of their programs was you got to dictate what ideas actually came in and got funded. And it wasn't really up to people to be able to figure out ideas and implement them themselves. They had to conform to what the federal government wanted to do, what their themes were, what their focuses were. And I found that that was a very strange way to relate to money, and that it could actually be used as a tool for positive good and not just more as a passive tool to survive. And so when I left the government and got involved in the private sector, I started looking at finance more as a tool to create more of a positive environment and to be able to do things like entrepreneurial activities. So I guess you could say I didn't really come into the finance sector meaning to be interested in it, but I started looking at it in different ways and realizing that it's more of an organic tool and a means to get you to do new and positive things more than anything.
That's wonderful. That's so great, and that really aligns well with so much of what we discussed in the class this semester. Because I found that many of our students maybe did look at money and finance in a kind of a negative way, right? It has a negative stigma in many respects to it. So
absolutely. I mean, you look at it, I feel like it's the root that you kind of need, and when you use it in the proper way, then it actually is a lot of fun to work with, just like any tool. Like I'm scared of a drill, and I find it absolutely terrifying to work with until I actually understand how it operates and all the different ways you can use it, and the fact that there's more than just one scary drill out there. And so finance for me has been kind of a long journey of finding it just as one way to look at it, and now it's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it.
Love it. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
So like Erin, I came into the financial services industry also without intention. I started out going to school. Primarily, I wanted to focus on psychology, and so I did finish with an undergraduate in psychology. Got a summer student position with the government of Saskatchewan and was there for about 5 years. Wanted a shift in human resources, so saw an opportunity with Connexus Credit Union in their HR department, where I was for just over 3 years. The appeal to money, or I guess the lack of appeal to money with me, also started in childhood. I grew up in a very poor home, single mother, welfare, no father. So when I thought about money and I think about finances, even still to this day, it can be intimidating. Over the last year and a bit, I've started to be intentional about the leadership journey and the leadership path. So started to wonder what that could look like, and an opportunity for a manager of financial services came up. And I had been leading one individual for the last year and a bit and wanted more leadership opportunities. And at Connexus, we firmly believe that 80% of what you do on the leadership side is about the how, so around leading others, being able to lead yourself, and then eventually lead an enterprise. And 20% is the technical side. So I thought, I'm going to challenge this. I'm going to see what that's actually like, and I'm going to jump over to the retail side of things. So after 9.5 years of being in human resources, I made the shift and the jump into retail, into a retail environment. Love it. I learn something new every single day. Do finances still terrify me? Absolutely. But I'm learning to overcome that with a strong team of advisors.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Glad about that.
Thank you.
So for me, again, the negative connotation with money came along as well, just through childhood and seeing that money is very disposable. So we would get it and we would spend it, was basically how I grew up. Now getting into finance, that was never my goal and never something that interested me, because money, again, is intimidating when you think about it. And it's very easy to accrue debt. And so I was scared of it. So getting involved in it was not something that was top of mind. I got interested in sales because I'm a very, I'm a go-getter. I love to talk to people. So I got my foot in the door with Gold's Gym. And from there, I was doing cold calls. So I had a phone book in front of me and I was talking to people through the phone book. And of course, rejection came quickly with that. I had a friend who worked at Connexus. So from there, she kind of talked to me about what Connexus does and how they talk to their members, and really have conversations with them about their finance and helping them be financially well off. That concept was so foreign in my mind because, of course, I was used to having a phone book in front of me and saying, come in, we'll give you this really great rate. So from there, I applied, and it just kind of started out. I was on the front line and was able to have really good conversations with our members, and to see that snowball into the effect of they would come in and say, thank you, I really appreciate it. And just seeing your work and the small conversation that you have lead into something so great was really powerful. And from there, leadership was something I wanted to do. So recently got into a leadership role, and now that's where I am.
Awesome. Thank you, all three of you. That's a great introduction into why you chose, how you got into the careers that you did, and that leads into my next. I'm going to segue now into the next question, which is, which some of you who've already you've spoken to this a bit. So for that reason, I'm going to segue to question number 3, because you've actually, all of you, now that I read it, have really covered 1 and 2. So number 3, after entering the workforce in a financial role, what are some professional designation certifications that are most valuable to help advance someone's career to the next level? How important is it in today's current employment environment to seek one of these accreditations? So for example, a CAFM, CFA, CPA, MBA. If you guys have any thoughts or insights into the usefulness of such a designation in this field, right? In the field of finance. Yeah.
Should we start this out instead?
Yeah. Why don't we? That's fair. That's fair.
So I can speak directly to my journey and how Connexus has contributed to that. When I talk about education, it's very important, and I always encourage my staff to think about it and how it's going to contribute to their future goals and how it's going to help them as a person. So the first thing that I would recommend is the CU 185. And what that is it's a course to help them get to know the credit union system, the credit union background, our products and services. And even if you're not going into the financial sector, it's important to know those things because they directly impact everybody. The next course would be the CIFP 201 or 204. So the 201 is directly associated with the it's a retirement course. So again, everybody retires, everybody needs to know how to save their money, and that course is directly associated with that. And with the 204, it is the will and the risk assessment, which is good as well because you might become an executor once your parents are older, and there are responsibilities that you have to take on. So those would be a good starter point for anybody interested in getting into the finance background.
Excellent. Thank you. And you are prepared. Thank you so much. Do you mind if we go to you next?
Sure, yeah. So even though I have a different type of educational background, the Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, the Master's in HR, I don't have any specific financial services or financial industry accreditation or anything like that. However, I can speak to my time in human resources with Connexus Credit Union. The corporate finance department was actually within my portfolio, so they were my client group. And what I can tell you about the different accreditations, such as the CPA, the CFA, those types of things, is if you have a large pool of candidates, those will typically be the differentiating factor in choosing a candidate. So at the end of the day, it's not only accreditations that get looked at, but if you've got 30 applications, and of those 30 applications, 10 individuals already have the accreditation and the experience to go with that to be successful in the role. And those are the applications that potentially could be looked at first. It shows a willingness to commit to the industry. It shows a strength, and also it shows a dedication to continue on in the financial industry. So with myself, of course, being a leader in the financial services industry, not having these things, what I can tell you that the emphasis on leadership is really helping me to be successful because I'm coming into the role with knowledge of coaching, knowledge of training, curriculum, those types of things. So I'm able to support my team. Now, in saying that, in roles such as accounting or finance, they are looking more for those deep-rooted levels of expertise and those accreditations. So,
thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah, in my company, I do a lot of the HR as well. And so you're exactly right when you say that those letters, especially I find with our generation, the millennial generation, everyone is going to school, everyone's got a degree. And so to have something unique or specialized is something that people look favorably on because jobs these days are less looked at in a general perspective and more looked at for trying to specifically find that experience and that designation that speaks to that specific role. It's very much built in a more narrow perspective. That being said, I'm a big fan of being a generalist, and I'm a big fan of the MBA designation for someone who's looking maybe not to focus directly on finance as their specialty and maybe not wanting to be an accountant necessarily, but financial knowledge is rooted in everything. It weaves into everything. So if you want to move up in a company that's maybe not a bank or not a finance-related institution, where you should still have a financial background. And an MBA is a great way to do that. And if you're not going to do an MBA, I would say blending any sort of background with financial supplemental courses is a good thing. A lot of universities these days, especially executive education sort of centers, are doing courses called financial management for the non-financial manager. And these are courses you can do within a couple of days and learn the basics of doing, reading an income sheet, an income statement, balance sheet, all these kinds of things, and just getting a little bit more comfortable with numbers. I would say that that's important. For me, I actually did my master's in public administration, but took the MBA stream, so you could do all these business courses, but also look at things from a government perspective. And blending those two is super useful because then you don't just look at the world from a financial lens, you look at it from a more global perspective. I find that that's very helpful as well.
That was beautiful. And it was wonderful because you guys answered, you came at this question from a number of different perspectives and complemented each other very well. So thank you. That was great. Question number 4, which areas of finance are most in need of talent today? And which areas are more difficult to break into due to high candidate competition? I was gonna say we could.
I can start.
Okay, we can.
So I was trying to think about this question more in relation to the students who actually attend First Nations University. And for me, I know that my company works with a lot of First Nations organizations and communities, especially band councils, economic development organizations. And any sort of finance talent to be used in those sort of more governance roles, like I was alluding to in my previous question, I think is super necessary. Because again, you kind of go into maybe a political type of role, like I was in the bureaucracy, you're in the bureaucracy, and you think maybe finance is super necessary, maybe I can get away with not having to study too much more. But, you know, again, I think bringing those talents into either the rest of your council or the rest of your administration structure is super useful. And, you know, I think it's important to focus on that too, because a thing that I hear a lot about is sort of brain drain, where a lot of students leave their communities and then they get a great job in the city, but they don't actually bring that financial knowledge back, which makes the experience of knowing someone who works in finance a little less scary and a little bit more familiar for your community members. And so getting to actually see someone who's working in finance, succeeding in finance, bringing that knowledge back to communities, I think is it's fantastic. So I would say, to answer the question, the areas of finance most in need of talent is bringing it back to the community in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through volunteerism or whatever. For the areas more difficult to break into due to high candidate competition, for our generation, everything's hard to get into. But again, that's where if you go the extra mile and get those designations, CFA, CAFM, then you really can stand out.
Thank you. That was great.
I tend to agree with Erin in that where we need the most talent today is those community initiatives, those customer-facing roles. And going back to question number 3, where we talked about accreditation, wanted to share too that in those member-facing or customer-facing roles, you don't necessarily need to have strong accreditation or any accreditation. So at Connexus, for our financial service representatives, which really are one of the most important roles in the entire organization, because they serve our members face to face. They're there on the front line. They're handling member requests and serving them to help them be the best version of themselves financially. So when I think about the accreditations required for those roles, we're looking for people who are passionate about customer service, who have a high school education, and who have that willingness and that desire to help our members grow, which goes directly back to Erin's point about community. So individuals who care about community, individuals who want to give back and have that community spirit as part of their core fundamental values. When I think about which areas are most difficult to break into, it is those ones that have those letters behind them, those accreditations. And probably the reason for that is because you are really looking for the top talent. So when I think about my time in recruiting for corporate services roles, those are hard to break into because a lot of those roles, individuals will get into them. The teams had great morale, not a lot of turnover. And when there was a recruitment or a competition for them, heavy competition. Back to Erin's point about the millennials, everything has a competitive component to it. Jobs are hard to find, especially at that senior level. So where we need people the most is that community touch point or a member-facing touch point, and which ones are more difficult to get into, for sure, those ones with those accreditation pieces behind.
I don't know if I could top that. I completely agree with Erin and Andrea. I don't think there's anything else that I really have to add. The only thing I would say is make sure you're communicating in your interview, if you do have one, that you're involved in the community and how you're involved and how you're supporting people in their finances. And if you're not, how are you going to help them? What do you bring to the table that maybe somebody doesn't?
Absolutely. I think too, from an HR perspective, you look at the letters, but then immediately you go to experience. And so anytime you can say, I did a co-op, I did a summer term, I did a maternity leave term, it wasn't for long, but then you've really got a foot in front of a lot of the other people who you're going to be competing against because you've got real world knowledge. And again, that's why I'm a fan of being a generalist, because you can say, well, my financial strength is there, I'm sure as everyone else who you're interviewing for sure, but I volunteer, I'm a member of this board, and I've been out there in the community and I've seen the problems and I understand them from a holistic perspective. And so I'm able to actually speak to people in a way that maybe other people who have just gone through school straight from high school and then they're out and facing the real world haven't had a chance to do yet.
Absolutely. And what I just have to say, what I love about all of your responses is that that focus on community, because certainly I know for our students that is such a critical value that they have, right? Pursuing education in hopes to give back in some way, right? And so, I think you've all offered different pathways for students who might maybe want to be more in the generalist role, but it's still ways that they can affect change in their communities in the field of finance, right? And give back. And certainly you've talked about specific ways, right, where they can, if this is a career that they want, what steps can they take to get there, and how might that again translate back to the affect the community and provide wonderful returns to the community in the end. So thank you for that. That's an important point here. I think so, certainly because of our students and where their values certainly are and where their focus is. So that leads to last question. And thank you again. You guys have been so articulate and eloquent in your responses. What are the main differences between working in finance at a financial institution like a bank, credit union, or an accounting firm versus working in finance in the private sector?
I would love to tackle this question.
Yes.
First, if that's okay. So I'll specifically speak to the differences between a bank and a credit union. So with a bank has shareholders. So at the end of the day, profitability means direct income or shares for the shareholders. And with a credit union, we're all members. We all get a voting right in order to vote for the board of directors. We all are members. If our credit union does well, so too do our members. And I think that's really important, and that's our differentiating factor. And the difference between going into a bank where the focus is going to be heavy on sales, so really pushing products. So it maybe isn't necessarily what that individual needs. Let's take an individual with a credit card, for example. Individual comes in, they want to have some money to be able to go on a vacation. If you're walking into a bank, I would suggest that an individual might see that as an opportunity to make a sale. Pitching, there's a credit card. The difference with a credit union is that it's more focused on the individual, more focused on the member, more focused on what that person needs in order to be successful and to be the best version of themselves financially. And what that means is financial wellness. So to me, the biggest differentiating fact really comes down to caring about profits or caring about the person. So that's the driving home factor for me, and that's why I choose to do all of my banking with a credit union. That's why I continue to be employed by one.
Thank you. Great response. Great answer. Thank you. Either one of you want to?
The only thing that I would have to add to that is just to remember that the private sectors are the people who are caring about the business, so the financial wellness of the business as a whole. And if you think about credit unions, for example, they're caring about the financial wellness of the members. So that would be the only thing that I would have to add to Andrea's point.
And of the community, the way that credit unions give back to the communities in which they serve, and even in communities that they're not present in, it's huge. It's astronomical, whether it be the Children's Hospital, whether it be hockey rinks, whether it be different initiatives going on in the community, the credit unions are always there. They always have a presence.
Absolutely.
So I looked at this question more from a sort of an entrepreneurial perspective. Being in the private sector and kind of a smaller company, the way I looked at it was I think that more structured institutions like banks and credit unions and these sorts of things, you have mandated governance structures and rules you have to live by. And I think that is fantastic, especially for someone who's first starting out in this industry, to sort of act as an incubator. And if you're toying with the idea of being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, I highly recommend working in an institution like a bank or a credit union or an accounting firm, because you get to know very specific rules of the world, and you get to understand how business is done in those institutions. And maybe you get to borrow some ideas. Maybe you get to think about, if I was to do this myself, I would do it a little bit differently. And I think it helps to kind of plant that seed for if you go and want to start your own business and you want to feel a little bit of freedom, you want to be able to innovate in these sorts of things, will provide such a good base. And you can always, go back or stay, or, keep learning from the cycle of going, being an entrepreneur on the side, maybe working in a credit union as well.
Right.
But, then you get to also innovate, and you have influence over what the business does itself. And that's a very rewarding feeling all the time, to be able to run something yourself and to know that I'm building on what I learned somewhere else, and to be able to give it a try in a different way.
Absolutely. And again, all these responses are great because they come at the question from different perspectives, right? And that's great because we have students, many who want to go work for a larger organization, many who will likely want to pursue credit union as an employer, financial institution, but many of our business students are also looking to be entrepreneurs and set out on their own and do some, live out a dream in that way. But others want to live out their dream in terms of, working with an organization and giving back in that way and being intrapreneurs, as we call it, right, in organizational behavior. And in fact, I'm really excited because actually I'm thinking this recording could go big, guys. I can use it for all the right reasons. I mean, so much of what we're talking about here today is has tie-ins to so many of our courses that we teach here. And actually, I'd love to be able to share this with a number of the classes in the upcoming semester that I teach, because I think so much of what you touch on is it's so relevant to what we're teaching in our business program. So thank you, and I think that ends the questions, which must think, Hannah, again, thank you for these questions. They're wonderful questions, and I think we're going to end this first panel and as I said before, you guys were incredibly articulate, eloquent, and came so prepared. Thank you, and I'm going to give you a hand. And we'll prepare now for our second panel. So thank you so much.
Thanks for setting the bar.
Yes.
Oh,
there's a question.
Yes. Oh,
There's a question.
First, I'd like to thank the two ladies that said up here. I'll introduce myself. My name is Robert Cody. I sit as First Nation Alumni Association. I have a Bachelor of Education, and I went through the Inca program, and I taught for 10 years on First Nation schools. And took my class to E-Spirit entrepreneurship. I took my class to Moncton, Ottawa, Quebec City. So a great program there for entrepreneurship, but for some reason it stopped due to the funding. And you guys are so intelligent, but for recruiting on First Nations, I think we're really lacking due to how we look at money, like our leadership, our chiefs. The more you gave out, the more respect you had in your career as a leader. And I see a lot of leaders, once their political career is done, they don't have a financial plan. And even our students in our own First Nations people, we don't plan, and there's no trust in wills. There's a big market there too. And also, I think from K to 12, I think we got to learn more about our money. Right from the start. I took 25 students to New York in a year. We had to fundraise and show them where the money is, like how we got there and what we had to do to get there. And basic stuff like passports. They didn't have, there's so much lacking, but you have to be really, really resourceful. And I had the opportunity to work for the Royal Bank for 5 years before I went back to school. So I had my eyes open with. I just about won the trip to the cruise. I was a finalist for quarterly performance. I know how it is. Your job is judged every 4 months to see how you're doing and how you're performing. And I really enjoyed my time with the bank because we did so much for the community. But I think we got to translate more into our schools. Our young students got to learn about money. They got to know about savings. And my son is in first year. He's first semester university. The transition from the high school to university, he loves it. He loves school. But out of a group of 14 grade 12s, he's the only one. The rest fell to the wayside. So I think there's lack of support. And I think in terms of recruiting First Nations, it's wide open. There's so many. I've seen so many talented students that they don't know. They can't open that gate to get in the system. And our elders tell us education is the key to success. So they really gotta. I don't like to say this, but the competition. They don't know what that is. I tried to explain. There's only a limited amount of money for post-secondary funding. You don't realize this, but you're competing against yourselves. So you gotta have that, you gotta have that mentality of in order to succeed, you gotta be successful in your studies. So I believe we really do gotta concentrate more on our K-12 system. But where you guys are heading, and thank you for sharing your information. It was really good to hear, and I wish more students would come. I wish I could take you to the schools and get you to speak.
I'm available.
Yeah, so,
Full-blooded member of Brown Town, so we'll come around and we'll share knowledge.
yeah, really, like it's like the next generation coming up, it's gonna be totally awesome. Like, they're gonna they know what they want, and this world is there for them, and I feel pretty passionate about my next generation because I kind of touched the lives of a few of my students, and where they're going, and I think we're going to be pretty successful. But I always tell them, you guys got it's partnerships. Your training, your education is key, but you still got to remember where you come from, and for our governance too. Our bands are multi-million-dollar businesses. In order to run that, you got to have that financial background. Like, you just can't run and jump in there, and all of a sudden you're dealing with general ledgers and budgets and stuff like that. So you got to have this on the ground training right away. Like, so much needed for our own communities. But I'm glad I walked in and she offered me a cup of coffee. Here, but Katrina, thank you for your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I know that we want to transition to the panel, but I want to just share with you, number one, thank you. And number two, Connexus has been intentional about doing financial literacy presentations in K-12, elementary, high school, and recently just started to infiltrate in the university setting. What I see here and what I'm hearing you say is that there's a really strong need for a partnership for places like a Connexus who are infiltrating into financial literacy education, and Indigenous individuals who can have that joint delivery of the content to ensure that right from a young age that content is integrating and sharing that information that is so vital and important for individuals to be successful. So I'm seeing here a need for a partnership, and we can take that away and have some conversations about that, but I see a clear need. We've reached and impacted over 800 students alone last year with our programming.
That's our emerging leader programming. That's not even when you take into account the community investment pieces, PR, some of that. It's just the
Young Leaders Group.
Yeah, it's individuals under the age of 35, and there's about 87 of us that come from across the province that's involved, and that's their committee is kind of what you see in front of you here. And yeah, I mean, the numbers just, you're 100% right. Like, the need is there, the want is there, the desire is there. It's finding a way to tangibly communicate it to them in a way that resonates and is advice-based as opposed to what you should be doing. And I know we'll probably talk a little more about that on our but yeah, Andrew's bang on. It's the appetite is there, so it's filling that where we can.
And we're able to, resonate with some individuals, but for us to go out and make a meaningful difference, we need that representation from Indigenous peoples as well, and sharing it in a way that's meaningful for that individual and telling a story that really drives it home. So I just want to share that.
You guys, we also need to talk, right? Because that's exactly what my mandate is to be able to share financial literacy knowledge to the Indigenous community. When you look at the history of the world in terms of managing finances and using cash, 2,000-3,000 years ago, people were using coin as an exchange for goods and services. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, Indigenous people weren't allowed to leave the reserve to work. So it's only been in the last generation of people that we're actually starting to see Indigenous people having a source of income. So we have a lot of learning to do, a lot of catching up to do. And what I do with the workshops that I present, as I say, has nothing to do with our worthiness or our capability to learn personal finance management as a vital life skill. This is just us needing to know what we need to know. So I talk about the personal experiences that I've encountered when I've been thrown in the fire, how I've managed to come out of that. I talk about a lot of the financial terminology, the usage of words, what it means to Indigenous people. And I try to give it a cultural component to it. So I talk about it in terms of what we did traditionally as people, how we talk about it. What I do is I actually incorporate something called the Financial Plan Buffalo. So we talk about how Indigenous people use 100% of the buffalo, and I introduced it to the admin class, the admin student we're teaching. We talk about traditionally we use 100% of the buffalo. The buffalo was a primary source of survival for Indigenous people. And we repurposed and we prepared and we stored and we celebrated and we did all these wonderful things with 100% of what every buffalo killed. So I translate that in terms of a financial plan for Indigenous people so that they can make real life vital choices now. And I tell people, I encourage them, and it's kind of a motivational thing as well, because I tell them, you know, for so many centuries, we have not had free will or choice. Only now are we starting to have free will. So every single morning we get to wake up and make a free will choice. Am I going to do better for myself and for my family? And I relate because home ownership, land ownership, accumulation of personal wealth, those are foreign subjects to Indigenous people. Those are not things I was grown up learning to know, right? We're communal people. So we have to share what we have. So I try to teach lessons about financial literacy in terms of things that are really culturally significant to our Indigenous community, because we need to catch on to that, right? So that's really important. I have such a passion for it. Honestly, I've done this personally for 20 years as a hobby, sharing with people. My son said, why don't you start a business, Mom? There's always somebody sitting at our kitchen table. And I was in a near fatal car accident where I ended a 17-year career with the federal government where I managed multi-million-dollar contracts and acquisitions. And I thought, this kid is onto something. So that's why I started Scout Financial Solutions, was because I was seeing a lot of our Indigenous people doing repetitively poor actions because nobody knew and nobody told them. And it's a taboo subject in Indigenous community to talk about accumulation of wealth if you're going to use it for your benefit, right? So that's a difficult thing. So I try to encourage people to learn about money. And I think I've connected with 80-some plus students at the university here where they're saying, I get it. I see it. So when we talk about theory and ideologies, those are completely 300% foreign to someone like ourselves because we grew up without those concepts in our community, and they were taboo and they were wrong and incorrect because they didn't match up or meld well with our cultural teachings. So it's a huge undertaking to be able to say, let's transform those into relatable things. I own my home, I manage my finances, I have savings because I can help community, because I support activities for youth, I support activities for elders, I support activities for others. So we have to redirect and change the way we're seeing personal finances and how it can actually help the greater cause, the greater good. So I love it. I'm so passionate about it. I'm seriously, like, I cannot stop